The spaceport never truly slept. Bright white lights shone over metal floors and tall ships from distant stars. Engines hummed like restless giants, and strange voices echoed in languages most humans still did not understand. Earth had joined the Galactic Alliance only 5 years ago, and even now many people walked carefully, unsure of their place in this wide and watchful galaxy. Ethan Cole worked in Hangar 17, far from the main hall, where diplomats smiled and reporters waited for history to happen. He was a maintenance mechanic, the kind of man who fixed broken landing gear and cleaned carbon burns for ship hulls. He kept his head down and his words few. Most workers said he was reliable, some said he was cold, but no one truly knew him. For weeks, someone had been watching him. She stood near the far railing on the upper level, tall and still, her silver skin soft like moonlight, her eyes glowing faint blue under the artificial lamps. She wore the dark uniform of a Varelian envoy, smooth fabric that seemed to shift like liquid when she moved. Her name was Lyra, though Ethan did not care to learn at first. The first time she approached him, he pretended not to see her. "Human Ethan Cole," she had said gently, her voice calm and even. "May I ask you something?" He tightened a bolt on the engine panel and walked away without answering. The second time, she waited outside the tool storage room. "You carry heavy emotion," she said, studying him with those glowing eyes. "It is unusual." Ethan brushed past her shoulder without a word, his jaw tight, his hands shaking slightly, though he hid them in his pockets. By the third week, people had started whispering, "Why would a Varelian care about a human mechanic?" One dock worker muttered. "They say her species can feel emotions in the air." Another replied, quietly, "Maybe she is studying him." Ethan heard the whispers, but ignored them. He focused on his work, on the metal, on the simple logic of machines. Machines were easier than people. Machines did not ask about pain. Lyra did not stop watching. She never looked angry, never looked impatient. She simply observed, as if she were waiting for something to break. And something did. One night, long after the last ship had docked and the bright public lights had dimmed, Ethan stayed behind. He told his supervisor he needed to finish an inspection. But that was not true. He just did not want to go home. Home was quiet, too quiet. In the dark corner of Hangar 17, behind stacked cargo crates, he finally allowed himself to stop pretending. He sat on the cold metal floor and pressed his hand to his face. His shoulders shook as silent tears slipped through his fingers. He had held it in for weeks, months, maybe years. Ever since the attack on his old city, when an unknown alien fleet had mistaken a defense satellite for a threat and fired without warning. Ever since the sky had burned red and his younger sister had not made it out of their apartment building, he had told himself to be strong. He had told himself humans survived, humans endured. But in that empty hangar, strength felt like a lie. He did not hear her footsteps. Varelians moved too softly for human ears. "You cannot hide pain from my kind," a calm voice said behind him. Ethan froze, wiping his face quickly, anger rising to cover the shame. He turned and saw her standing a few steps away, her glowing eyes dimmer now, almost gentle. "Go away," he muttered, his voice rough. Lyra did not move closer, but she did not leave. "For weeks you avoided me," she said softly. "You refuse to look up, but your sorrow is loud. It echoes." "I'm not your project," Ethan snapped, standing quickly. "Find someone else to study." Her expression did not change, yet something about her posture seemed different, less distant. "I'm not here to study you," she replied. He laughed bitterly. "Then what? You feel sorry for the human mechanic?" "Yes," she answered simply. The word hit him harder than he expected. Silence filled the hangar, heavy and uncomfortable, machines ticking as they cooled from a day's work. Lyra looked at him not with curiosity, but with something else, something that felt almost like concern. "Your species carries pain differently," she said. "You break, but you continue moving. That is rare." Ethan looked away, jaw tight. He did not want her to see his tears again, did not want an alien to witness his weakness. "You know nothing about us," he said quietly. "I know more than you think," she replied. Somewhere in the distance, a warning light blinked red, casting brief flashes across her silver skin. For the first time, Ethan noticed she was not observing him like a scientist. She was watching him like someone afraid he might disappear. And in that moment, he felt something unfamiliar, not trust, not comfort, but the smallest crack in the wall he had built around his heart. If you want to see what happens next in this story of humanity and the unknown, make sure to subscribe to this channel and stay with us until the end. Because Ethan Cole had no idea that the alien woman he tried to avoid was not drawn to his weakness. She was drawn to something far more dangerous, something the entire galaxy was beginning to notice. And she was not the only one watching him. Lyra did not leave that night. Ethan expected her to turn away after he told her to go. He expected her pride to push her back toward the bright halls where other envoys walked with quiet power. But she remained standing in the shadows of Hangar 17, calm and steady like a silver statue that refused to fall. "You should not be here," Ethan said after a long silence, his voice low but no longer shaking. "The human sector closes after midnight." "I received permission," she answered softly. "I requested access to observe late shift behavior." He let out a tired breath. "Observe. There it is again." Lyra tilted her head slightly, a small movement that almost looked human. "You believe I see you as a subject," she said. "That is not correct." "Then what am I?" he asked, folding his arms, trying to rebuild the wall inside his chest. She looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time he did not look away. "You are a signal," she said quietly. The word felt strange in the empty hangar. "A signal of what?" he asked. "Of fracture," she replied, "and of strength." Ethan gave a dry laugh. "You aliens talk in puzzles." Lyra stepped a little closer, not enough to threaten, but enough that the blue glow of her eyes reflected faintly on the metal floor. "My species, the Varelians, once felt as your kind does," she said. "Deep emotion, attachment, grief, joy, rage, love." He did not respond, but his shoulders stiffened. 200 cycles ago, we fought a war against a machine civilization," she continued. "They did not attack our bodies first. They attacked our minds. They released a wave that suppressed emotional intensity. They believed feeling made us unpredictable, and unpredictability made us dangerous." Ethan frowned slightly despite himself. "We survived," Lyra said, "but something was lost. Our emotions returned in small forms, but never again in full depth. We do not drown in sorrow. We do not burn with passion. We exist in balance, controlled, stable." "Sounds peaceful," Ethan muttered. "It is quiet," she corrected gently. "Too quiet." The hangar lights flickered for a moment as a distant cargo ship powered up, shadows stretching long across the walls. "When your planet joined the Alliance," Lyra continued, "many species viewed humans as unstable, emotional, impulsive, dangerous. And you did not," Ethan said. "I did," she answered honestly, "until I began studying human emotional fields." "There it is again," he said sharply. She did not react to his tone. "Humans radiate emotion in ways we cannot ignore. It vibrates through space like low-frequency sound. Most humans burn brightly for short moments. Anger, joy, fear." She paused slightly. "You are different." Ethan felt irritation rise again. "Because I am broken." "Because you endure," she said. He turned away, walking toward his toolbox, pretending to check equipment so he would not have to face her words. "You do not know anything about endurance," he said quietly. "You did not watch your sky burn." Lyra was silent for several seconds, and when she spoke again her voice carried a tone he had not heard before, softer, almost uncertain. "You believe we have never lost cities?" she asked. He did not answer. "My homeworld lost 3 continents in that war," she said. "Billions of lives ended in silence. Our oceans boiled under machine fire. Our children hid in underground shelters for cycles." Ethan's hand froze over the toolbox latch. "We do not cry as humans do," she continued, "but we remember." The air between them felt heavier now, less like an argument and more like something shared. "Then why me?" Ethan asked finally, without turning around. "Why follow me for weeks?" "Because your emotional field did not fade," she said. "Most humans carry pain that rises and falls. Yours remains constant. It bends but does not collapse. It is like a star under pressure, dense, compressed, powerful. He slowly faced her again, confusion mixing with anger. You make it sound like I am some kind of weapon. Her glowing eyes dimmed slightly. That is what the Council fears, she admitted. The word council made his chest tighten. What does the Galactic Council have to do with this? Lyra hesitated, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked almost conflicted. Humans are being evaluated, she said carefully, not just politically, but biologically and psychologically. Your species survived extinction-level wars, climate collapse, internal division, and still expanded into space within a century. That is not normal by galactic standards. We are stubborn, Ethan replied. You are adaptive, she corrected, and your emotional resilience may be the most valuable resource in the Alliance. He stared at her, a cold feeling spreading through him. So, I'm a sample. You are proof, she said. Proof of what? That humans can break and continue. Silence returned, but this time it carried tension instead of distance. Ethan stepped closer now, anger no longer hiding behind exhaustion. If your council thinks they can use us as tools, they are wrong. Lyra met his gaze without fear. That is what I'm trying to determine, she said. Determine what? Whether humans will choose to stand beside the galaxy, she replied, or whether the galaxy will one day fear what humans become. A sudden alarm echoed faintly from another sector of the spaceport, a distant mechanical warning that quickly shut off, but left an uneasy feeling in the air. Ethan's heart beat faster, though he did not know why. You are hiding something, he said quietly. Lyra did not deny it. There are factions within the Alliance, she said, lowering her voice. Some believe humans should not be allowed to grow stronger. Some believe your emotional intensity could one day dominate other species. And you, he asked. She studied him again, not like a scientist, not like an envoy, but like someone standing at the edge of a decision. I believe, she said slowly, that if humanity is guided by individuals like you, then the galaxy does not need to fear. Ethan almost laughed at that. You barely know me. I know enough, she replied. Before he could respond, the main hangar doors trembled slightly as a heavy cruiser docked outside, the impact stronger than normal, dust falling gently from the ceiling beams. Both of them looked toward the sound. Lyra's eyes narrowed faintly, her calm expression sharpening for the first time. That ship was not scheduled, she said quietly. The lights flickered again, this time longer. Somewhere far across the spaceport, metal groaned. Ethan felt a strange chill crawl down his spine. You said humans are being evaluated, he murmured, staring toward the massive doors. Yes, Lyra replied, her voice no longer soft but alert. By who, he asked. Her glowing eyes reflected the red emergency lights that suddenly began to pulse across the hangar walls. By more than just the council, she said. And for the first time since she started watching him, Ethan realized something far more dangerous than curiosity had arrived at the spaceport. Something that might test not just his pain, but all of humanity. The red emergency lights did not stop flashing. They painted the walls of Hangar 17 in sharp pulses of warning, turning silver metal into waves of blood-colored shadow. Alarms began to echo across the spaceport, first distant and faint, then louder and closer, until the entire structure seemed to vibrate with tension. Ethan's first instinct was simple and human. Run toward the danger, not away from it. What is happening? He demanded, already moving toward the main control panel near the hangar doors. Lyra followed close behind him, her movements no longer slow and observant but sharp and precise. Unauthorized vessel breached docking protocol, she said, her voice calm but urgent. Energy signature does not match any registered Alliance fleet. Pirates, Ethan muttered. Possibly, she replied, or something worse. The massive hangar doors began to grind open halfway before locking in place. Thick smoke spilling in from the docking bay outside. Through the narrow gap, Ethan could see sparks flying and silhouettes running in panic. A loud explosion shook the structure. Metal screamed as something heavy crashed into the lower levels of the port. Lower deck just lost pressure, Lyra said after glancing at a wrist device that projected blue symbols into the air. Ethan grabbed a protective vest from the wall rack and threw one toward her without thinking. "Put that on," he said. She caught it with quick reflexes, studying it for half a second before slipping it over her uniform. "You are giving me protection," she observed. "You are in my hangar," he replied. "That makes you my responsibility." For a brief second, something changed in her glowing eyes, something deeper than analysis. Another explosion thundered through the spaceport, closer this time, and the ceiling lights flickered violently before stabilizing. Through the half-open doors, Ethan saw 3 armored figures rush across the docking platform. They were not human, their armor dark and jagged, weapons glowing with unstable red energy. They fired at security drones without hesitation. "Those are not common pirates," Lyra said quietly. "Do not tell me that," Ethan answered under his breath. Suddenly, a smaller figure stumbled into the hangar through the smoke. An alien child for one of the trader families that often docked there, its skin pale green, eyes wide with fear. Behind it, one of the armored attackers stepped through the smoke, weapon raised. Ethan did not think. He ran. He reached the child just as the attacker fired, the red energy blast slamming into a cargo crate behind them. Sending metal shards flying, Ethan grabbed the child and rolled behind a loading vehicle, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. "Stay down," he told the child, even though he was not sure it understood his language. Lyra moved differently, not charging forward but stepping into clear sight of the attacker. Her eyes flared brighter blue, and a thin wave of invisible force pulsed outward from her body. The attacker staggered slightly, as if hit by a sudden pressure in the air. Ethan stared in shock. "I thought your species was peaceful," he shouted. "We are controlled," she replied, focusing intensely, not helpless. Security drones finally swarmed into the hangar, forcing the armored attacker to retreat back through the smoke, dragging a wounded companion with him. Within moments, the docking platform grew quieter, though distant fighting still echoed through other sectors. Ethan looked down at the alien child in his arms. It clung tightly to his jacket. Trembling, without hesitation, he lifted it and carried it toward the emergency shelter door at the back of the hangar. "You should not expose yourself like that," Lyra said as she followed him. "That was impulsive. It was necessary," Ethan replied firmly, placing the child safely inside the reinforced shelter room with other civilians. Lyra watched him carefully, and this time there was no distant curiosity in her gaze, only recognition. "This is why," she whispered almost to herself. Ethan turned sharply. "Why what?" "This is why the Council fears and admires your species," she said. "You act before calculation completes. You choose protection over survival odds." He shook his head, frustrated. Any decent person would do that. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "No. Many species would retreat and preserve strategic assets first. Humans preserve lives first." Before he could argue, the hangar floor trembled again, stronger than before, a blast from somewhere deep in the station. A voice came through the emergency speakers, distorted but urgent. "All sectors prepare for containment breach. Unknown vessels attempting to seize Central Command." Ethan felt a chill run through him. Central Command means the Alliance Data Core. "Yes," Lyra confirmed, her expression tightening. "That core contains classified evaluations." "Evaluations of what?" he asked, though he already sensed the answer. "Of humanity," she replied. The words seemed to slow the air around them. "What kind of evaluations?" he pressed. Lyra hesitated, and that hesitation told him everything was worse than he thought. Psychological endurance thresholds, combat adaptability projections, long-term dominance probability models, she said quietly. "The Council has been studying whether humans could surpass current power hierarchies within 2 centuries. Ethan stared at her, disbelief mixing with anger. "You are not just watching me." "No," she admitted. "You are part of a larger pattern analysis. Your emotional density, your trauma survival markers, your continued functionality despite unresolved grief. These are indicators." "Indicators of what?" he demanded. "Of a species that grows stronger under pressure, she said. Another violent explosion rocked the hangar, this one so close that Ethan lost his footing and slammed into the metal floor. Pain shot through his side, sharp and immediate. Lyra knelt beside him quickly, checking the wound, her glowing eyes scanning his body with faint light. 2 fractured ribs, she said calmly. He forced himself to sit up despite the pain. I am fine, he muttered through clenched teeth. Through the smoke-filled doorway, more attackers pushed into the docking platform, heavier weapons now firing at defense turrets. They are not here for random destruction, Lyra said, her voice tense. They are targeting the data core specifically. To steal the files on humans, Ethan finished. Yes, she said. If hostile factions learn the Council believes humanity may become dominant, it could trigger preemptive war. Ethan looked toward the shelter where the alien child hid, then toward the battle beyond the doors, his ribs burning with each breath, fear rising inside him like a dark tide. For a brief second, he wanted to step back, to hide, to let trained soldiers handle it. But the image of the red sky from years ago flashed in his mind, the fire, the screams, the helplessness. His hands tightened into fists. You said humans break and continue, he said quietly, struggling to his feet despite the pain. Yes, Lyra answered, watching him closely. Then maybe it is time the galaxy sees that up close, he replied. She stared at him, something like off flickering across her usually controlled expression. In that moment, as alarms screamed and enemies advanced towards secrets that could change interstellar politics forever, Lyra understood something the Council had only calculated on screens. Humanity was not dangerous because it felt deeply. It was dangerous because even in grief, even in fear, even with broken ribs and shaking hands, it chose to stand. The battle inside the spaceport did not end quickly. It stretched through long minutes that felt like hours. Security forces finally pushed the attackers back toward their ships. Explosions faded into distant echoes, and the red emergency lights slowly stopped flashing, leaving behind smoke, broken metal, and a sharp smell of burned circuits. Ethan did not remember falling. He only remembered the last shockwave that hit the hangar entrance, the force throwing him sideways, his injured ribs screaming in pain, and then darkness closing in like heavy water. When he opened his eyes again, the world was white and quiet. He was lying in a medical bay, soft blue lights glowing above him, machines humming gently around the bed. A transparent medical screen floated near his chest, showing scans of his ribs slowly repairing under advanced treatment beams. For a moment, he wondered if everything had been a dream. Then he saw her. Lyra stood beside the bed, her silver skin reflecting the soft medical lights, her glowing eyes dimmer than usual, almost thoughtful. She had removed her envoy cloak and placed it carefully on a nearby chair, as if she planned to stay for a long time. You are awake, she said quietly. How long? Ethan asked, his voice dry. 6 hours, she replied. Your injuries were significant, but not fatal. He tried to sit up, pain flaring through his side, but she gently placed a hand near his shoulder, not touching, just close enough to stop him. Remain still, she said. Your body heals quickly, but it is not invincible. He studied her face carefully, searching for the distant curiosity he had grown used to seeing, but it was not there. Why are you still here? He asked. I requested authorization to remain, she answered. You are an envoy, he said slowly. You should be reporting to your council. I've already transmitted my report, she replied. And he pressed. And my conclusions are changing, she said. That caught his attention more than the pain in his ribs. Outside the medical bay's glass wall, injured humans and aliens alike were being treated. Medics moved quickly but calmly. The attack had been contained, but the damage was real. The attackers failed to reach the data core, Lyra said. Security locked down the central systems in time. So humanity's big secret is safe? Ethan muttered. Lyra's eyes focused sharply on him. You deserve to know the full truth, she said. He let out a tired breath. I was guessing that part was coming. She stepped closer to the bed, lowering her voice even though the room was private. The Council's evaluation of humanity is not just theoretical, she said. It is predictive modeling based on hundreds of variables: conflict response time, emotional recovery speed, social bonding strength, risk tolerance. You make us sound like a lab experiment, he said flatly. In part you are, she admitted, but not in cruelty, in caution. Caution of what? Of becoming dependent on you, she answered. He frowned, confused. Our species lost the depth of our emotions, she continued. We function with logic and balance. We avoid extremes. That stability helped us survive, but it also limited us. When we encountered humanity, we detected something we no longer possess: emotional amplitude, intensity that does not fade under pressure. He remained silent, listening despite himself. The Council believes that humans may restore what was lost in species like mine, she said, through alliance, cultural exchange, even neurological study. You were studying me to fix your people, he realized. Yes, she said softly. The honesty in her voice made it difficult for him to be angry. For weeks I observed your emotional field, she continued. It did not spike and collapse like many others. It remained steady, compressed, but stable. Even in grief, you continued working, interacting, surviving. That is not strength, he said quietly, staring at the ceiling. That is just not knowing how to stop. Lyra's expression shifted slightly, almost like sadness, though Varelians rarely displayed it clearly. You misunderstand, she said. Strength is not the absence of breaking. It is movement after breaking. The words settled heavily in the room. He turned his head toward her. And what changed your conclusions? He asked. You ran toward danger, she replied. You protected a child, not of your species, not of your family, without hesitation, even with unresolved hatred toward aliens after your city was destroyed. His jaw tightened at the mention of his past. Yes, she said gently. I know about the attack on your city. It was not sanctioned by the Alliance. It was a rogue faction long eliminated. That does not bring them back, he said. No, she agreed quietly. Silence filled the space again, but it was different now, less hostile, more honest. When I first approached you, she continued, I intended to gather data, to confirm models. And now, he asked. Now I'm questioning the models, she said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. The Council fears that if humans grow unchecked, you may surpass current power structures, she explained. They analyze probabilities of dominance, rebellion, expansion. And what do you think? He asked carefully. She looked directly into his eyes, her blue glow steady and clear. I think humanity will not dominate because it seeks power, she said slowly. It will rise because it refuses to abandon others. Before he could respond, a faint tremor passed through the station again. Not an explosion this time, but a deep vibration from distant engines powering up. Lyra glanced toward the window, her expression tightening. The attacker's main vessel is still in orbit, she said. Alliance forces are preparing a response. Ethan pushed himself slightly upright despite the pain. So this is not over. No, she said. And there is more? He studied her carefully, sensing another layer beneath her words. The faction that attacked today, she continued. They were not random pirates. They're linked to a coalition that believes humanity should be eliminated before it matures. The air in the medical bay seemed to grow colder. Eliminated, he repeated. Yes, she said. Preemptive extinction to prevent future imbalance. For several seconds, he could not speak. They already see us as a threat, he said finally. They see potential, she corrected. And potential frightens those who rely on control. He let out a slow breath, staring at the ceiling lights, his mind racing. You followed me for weeks, he said quietly. Because you thought I was proof of something? Yes, she answered. And now, he asked. Now, I believe you are not just proof, she said, her voice softer than ever before. You are a choice. A choice of what? Of what kind of future the galaxy will have, she replied. Outside the medical bay, Alliance cruisers began lifting off from the docking platforms, their engines glowing bright against the dark of space, preparing to chase the retreating hostile vessel. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle inside him, heavier than his injuries. He had spent weeks avoiding her gaze, refusing to look up, hiding behind anger and grief. But now he understood something he had not considered before. She had not been watching him because he was weak. She had been watching him because even in weakness, he had not stopped being human. And somewhere beyond the walls of the station, forces were already deciding whether that humanity should be allowed to survive. The Alliance did not wait long to respond. Within hours of the attack, a fleet of cruisers surrounded the damaged spaceport like a shield of steel and light. Emergency meetings were called, encrypted transmissions filled the command channels, and rumors spread faster than official statements. Some said it was only a warning strike. Others said it was the beginning of something much larger. Ethan was discharged from the medical bay sooner than the doctors preferred. His ribs were reinforced with a temporary regeneration brace. Dull pain still pulsing through his side with every breath, but he refused to remain in bed while decisions about his species were being made above his head. Lyra met him outside the recovery wing, her expression more serious than he had ever seen it. "The Council has issued a directive," she said without greeting. "That does not sound good," Ethan replied, adjusting the brace under his jacket. "It is a test," she said. He gave her a tired look. "We just survived an attack. What kind of test comes after that?" "A public one," she answered. "The hostile faction that attacked us has retreated into the Heliox Drift, a collapsing star system filled with unstable radiation storms. They have taken several civilian vessels hostage, including ships from 3 major Alliance species." Ethan felt his stomach tighten, and many council members believe this is an opportunity, she continued. "If humans truly possess the resilience our models predict, this is the moment to prove it." "You want us to fly into a dying star system," he said slowly. "The mission has been offered to all member species," Lyra replied. "Most have declined due to extreme risk projections." "And humans?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Your commanders have volunteered," she said, watching him carefully. Of course they had. Humans had always run towards storms others avoided, sometimes out of courage, sometimes out of stubborn pride, sometimes simply because no one else would go. "The Council want a joint crew," Lyra continued, "symbolic cooperation, but human leadership." Ethan stared at her, a quiet realization forming. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you have been selected," she said. The words hung heavy between them. "I'm a mechanic," he said. "You are more than that," she replied. "You have combat survival experience, high adaptability scores, and most importantly, demonstrated self-sacrifice under threat conditions." "You mean I ran into a fight without thinking?" he muttered. "You acted," she corrected. He turned away for a moment, staring through the wide observation window at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there, a collapsing sun was tearing space apart, radiation storms ripping through ships like paper, and hostages waiting in fear. "This is not a rescue," he said quietly. "It is a message." "Yes," Lyra admitted. "If humans succeed, the Alliance will solidify around you. If you fail, factions arguing for containment will gain power." "And if we refuse?" he asked. Her silence answered that question. Within 2 days, Ethan stood inside the hangar once again, but this time not as a mechanic. In front of him rested a mid-sized Alliance cruiser, reinforced hull glowing faintly with adaptive shielding, its name newly painted across the side in bold human letters, Resolute Dawn. The crew gathered in small groups, humans in dark flight suits, a few alien specialists standing apart with cautious expressions. Tension filled the air, not fear exactly, but awareness of risk. Lyra approached him near the boarding ramp. "You are not required to go," she said quietly. "Your injury provides reasonable excuse." He looked at her for a long moment, remembering the red sky from years ago, remembering the child he carried to safety, remembering the way she had said he was a choice. "If I stay," he said slowly, "what does that prove?" She did not answer. He stepped toward the ramp, pain flaring in his ribs, but not stopping him. "I'm tired of being evaluated," he added. "If the galaxy wants to know what humans are, it can watch." Inside the ship, the atmosphere felt different from the station, tighter, focused. The human captain, Mara Vance, stood near the central hollow table, projecting a rotating image of the Heliox Drift, a star collapsing inward, fragments of planets spinning in violent orbit, radiation waves pulsing like angry tides. "Our objective is simple," Captain Vance said to the crew. "Locate the hostage vessels, disable hostile ships, and extract civilians. Projection shows 70% chance of severe hull damage, 30% chance of total loss." Murmurs rippled through the alien specialists. "Humans have accepted worse odds before," Vance added calmly. Ethan felt something stir in his chest. Not pride exactly, but recognition. As the Resolute Dawn launched, the station shrinking behind them, Lyra stood beside him at the observation panel. "You joined without hesitation," she observed. "Do not mistake this for bravery," he replied, watching the stars stretch into lines as the ship entered faster than light travel. "I am afraid." "I know," she said softly. Hours later, they dropped out of warp at the edge of the Heliox drift, and the sight stole the breath from every being on board. The star at the center pulsed violently, half collapsed into itself, streams of burning plasma arcing across space. Debris fields spun like blades. Lightning like radiation storms crackled between broken planetary fragments. It looked less like a system and more like a battlefield left behind by gods. Warning alarms immediately began sounding as radiation levels spiked, shields straining under invisible assault. Hostile vessels detected near the inner debris ring. A systems officer called out. On the hollow display, dark ships circled 3 damaged civilian transports trapped between gravitational distortions. "They're using the star's instability as cover," Lyra said quietly. Captain Vance turned toward the crew, her voice steady. "All hands, prepare for high-risk insertion." The ship lurched as it entered the outer storm layer, hull groaning under pressure, sparks bursting from a control panel on the far wall. Ethan gripped the console in front of him, fear rising like cold water in his veins. This was beyond anything he had faced before, beyond street-level attacks and damaged hangars. This was the raw chaos of space itself trying to tear them apart. A hostile cruiser suddenly emerged from behind a drifting asteroid fragment, weapons firing bright red beams toward them. The Resolute Dawn shuddered violently as shields absorbed the impact. "Return fire," Captain Vance ordered. Human gunners responded instantly, plasma cannons lighting the darkness with controlled bursts. Another wave of radiation slammed into the hull, the ship spinning slightly before stabilizing. "We are taking heavy damage," an engineer shouted. Ethan felt his ribs ache sharply, his fear pressing hard against his chest, whispering that this was too much, that survival was no longer certain. He closed his eyes for half a second. He saw again the burning sky of his childhood, the helplessness, the loss. And then he opened them. "We adjust shield frequency to match radiation pulse intervals," he said suddenly, stepping toward the engineering console despite not being assigned there. "The star's bursts are rhythmic. If we sync the modulation, we reduce strain by at least 15%. The chief engineer looked at him briefly, then nodded. "Do it." As the shields recalibrated, the strain on the hull eased slightly. Not enough to remove danger, but enough to buy time. Lyra watched him from across the command deck, her glowing eyes intense. The hostile cruiser fired again, but this time the Resolute Dawn held stronger, pushing forward through the storm instead of retreating. In that moment, surrounded by chaos, under fire, inside a dying star system that should have broken lesser crews, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Fear was still there, sharp and real, but it no longer controlled him. The trial of courage had begun, and the galaxy was watching to see whether humanity would collapse under pressure or burn brighter because of it. The Resolute Dawn pushed deeper into the Heliox drift, and space itself seemed to resist their presence. Radiation storms rolled like violent oceans of light. Fragments of shattered planets spun past the viewports like blades waiting to strike, and the dying star at the center pulsed brighter with each unstable collapse, as if warning them to turn back. But the human ship did not turn back. Another hostile cruiser broke through the debris field, flanking them from the right, its hull dark and scarred, engines glowing a violent red. weapons charging for a full power blast. Shields at 62%. The engineer shouted, structural stress increasing. Captain Mara Vance did not raise her voice. Hold formation. We break through, or we do not break at all. Ethan stood near the engineering console, hands moving across controls he had only studied in simulation. His ribs burned with every breath, sweat forming on his forehead, despite the cold air of the command deck. Radiation surge incoming, Lyra warned, her glowing eyes fixed on the sensor display. Pulse intensity higher than previous waves. On the main screen, the star erupted outward in a violent arc of plasma, a storm front racing toward them at impossible speed. Brace, someone whispered. The surge hit like a wall. The ship shook violently, lights flickered. A panel exploded near the rear station. Throwing sparks into the air, one of the alien specialists was knocked to the floor. For one terrifying second, the shields dropped to 30%, and the hostile cruiser fired. The impact slammed into their side. Metal groaned like something alive in pain. Warning sirens screamed. Gravity fluctuated and then stabilized again. We cannot take another hit like that. The engineer shouted, fear finally breaking through his control. Ethan looked around the command deck. He saw it clearly now. Humans and aliens alike gripping consoles, eyes wide, breaths uneven. Even Captain Vance's jaw was tighter than before. Fear was spreading, quiet but powerful. And in that moment, something inside Ethan rose up stronger than his fear. He stepped forward without thinking about rank or permission, his voice cutting through the alarms. Listen to me. Several heads turned toward him surprised. We knew this would hurt, he said, breathing hard but steady. We knew it would feel impossible. Humans have always walked into storms that were stronger than us. The ship shook again, but he kept speaking. We are afraid, he continued, his voice louder now. That does not mean we stop. It means we move anyway. Silence fell across the deck, except for the alarms and distant thunder of the star. We're not here because we're the strongest, he said. We are here because someone had to come, because those ships out there are waiting, because children are waiting. Lyra watched him closely, something bright flickering behind her calm expression. We survive, Ethan said, not because we feel nothing, but because we feel everything and still choose to stand. For a heartbeat. No one moved. Then Captain Vance gave a single sharp nod. Helm, push us closer to the debris ring, she ordered. Gunners, target their weapon arrays. Engineering, reroute non-essential systems to forward shields. The crew responded instantly, as if a switch had flipped, fear still present, but no longer paralyzing. The resolute Dawn surged forward, engines flaring brighter despite the strain. The hostile cruiser attempted to reposition, but human gunners fired with calculated precision, disabling one of its primary cannons in a burst of blue light. Another radiation pulse rolled toward them, but this time the shields held stronger, Ethan's earlier frequency adjustment stabilizing the modulation. Inside the debris ring, the three hostage transports drifted dangerously close to gravitational fractures, their hulls scorched, life support flickering. We are within extraction range, the navigation officer called out. Deploy boarding teams, Captain Vance ordered. Ethan grabbed a magnetic harness and secured it across his chest, ignoring the sharp protest from his ribs. Lyra stepped beside him, fastening her own restraint line. You should remain on the command deck, she said quietly. And miss the part where we prove your counsel wrong, he replied. A faint curve touched her lips, almost a smile. The airlock opened to chaos. Radiation lightning crackled across space. Debris drifted in unstable paths, and in the distance hostile fighters attempted one last attack run. Ethan and the boarding team propelled themselves toward the nearest transport, magnetic boots locking onto its damaged hull, cutting tools slicing through warped metal to create an entry point. Inside, civilians huddled in dim corridors, fear thick in the recycled air, when they saw human figures step through the smoke and sparks. Something shifted in their expressions, not just relief, but disbelief. You came, one of the alien crew members whispered. Yes, Ethan answered simply, helping lift a fallen support beam. Outside, The hostile cruiser made a final desperate charge toward the rescue zone. Engines overloading, weapons glowing unstable red. Collision course, Lyra warned through the comm channel. Captain Vance did not hesitate. All power to forward cannons, she commanded. The Resolute Dawn fired everything it had, beams of focused plasma striking the enemy ship's core at the exact moment its own weapons reached critical overload. For a blinding second, space lit up like a newborn star. Then the hostile cruiser tore itself apart in a violent chain reaction, fragments scattering harmlessly into the surrounding storm. Silence followed, broken only by the distant rumble of the dying sun. The remaining hostile ships retreated, vanishing into warp trails beyond the outer ring. Rescue shuttles began transporting civilians back to the Resolute Dawn, one by one, injured but alive. On the command deck, as the last shuttle docked, a quiet realization spread among the crew. They had done it. Against collapsing gravity fields, against superior firepower, against the raw fury of a dying star. They had not broken. Lyra stood beside Ethan once more, both watching the chaotic system slowly shrink as the ship prepared to jump to safer space. Her glowing eyes shimmered in a way he had never seen before, brighter, unsteady, almost overwhelmed. "What are you feeling?" he asked softly. She placed a hand lightly against her chest, as if surprised by the sensation beneath it. "It is intense," she said quietly. "It is not calculation, it is not balance." He studied her carefully. "It is pride," she said, her voice trembling for the first time since he had met her. "And relief, and something else I do not have a word for." Ethan allowed himself a small, tired smile. "That is being human," he said. Far beyond the Heliox drift, Alliance observers recorded the battle data. Council members watched projections update in real time, probabilities shifting, dominance models recalculating, fear-based scenarios weakening. Across the network, one conclusion grew louder than the rest. Humanity was not a threat because it sought control. It was a force because when the universe pushed, it pushed back. And in the silent space between stars, the echo of that defiance carried like a roar the galaxy could no longer ignore. Weeks passed after the Heliox drift mission, but the galaxy did not return to the same balance it once had. The story of the Resolute Dawn spread across Alliance networks. Recordings of the battle were studied in military academies. Civilian channels replayed the moment the human ship pushed through the radiation storm, and council debates shifted in tone from caution to respect. Humanity was no longer a question mark. It was a statement. Ethan Cole returned to Hangar 17 with reinforced ribs and a reputation he never asked for. Mechanics greeted him differently now, some with admiration, some with curiosity, a few with quiet disbelief that the same quiet man who once avoided eye contact had stood inside a dying star system and refused to retreat. He did not enjoy the attention. He preferred the sound of tools against metal, the simple logic of broken engines that could be repaired with steady hands. But something inside him had changed, not louder, not arrogant, just steadier. The nightmares came less often now. When he remembered the red sky of his childhood, it no longer felt like a weight crushing his chest. It felt like a scar, still there, but no longer bleeding. One evening, long after most workers had left, Ethan remained in the hangar alone, a half-disassembled shuttle resting above him on a lift platform, soft lights casting long shadows across the empty floor. He wiped grease from his hands and leaned against a support beam, breathing slowly, letting the quiet settle around him. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel lonely. "You no longer hide in the dark corners," a familiar voice said gently from behind him. He had not flinched this time. "I noticed," he replied without turning. Lyra stepped into view, her silver form illuminated by the low hangar lights, her uniform now marked with a small insignia Ethan did not recognize. "You received promotion," he observed. "Yes," she answered. "I have been appointed cultural liaison between Varelians and humanity." He gave a faint smile. "So now you study all of us." She shook her head slightly. "No, now, I learned from you." There was something different about her presence, not just in posture, but in energy. She seemed less distant, less measured, as if something inside her no longer required strict control. "You feel it now, do not you?" he asked quietly. She stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. "Yes," she admitted, "since the heliox drift, my emotional field has changed. It fluctuates more intensely. My people are reporting similar effects after prolonged interaction with humans." "Is that good?" he asked. "For the first time in centuries, we experience depth," she said, her glowing eyes shimmering slightly. "It is overwhelming, but it is alive." He studied her carefully, remembering the first night she found him crying behind cargo crates, remembering how he had told her to go away. "You found me when I was at my worst," he said softly. "Yes," she replied. "And you would not leave," he added. "No," she said again, but this time there was warmth in the word. A distant cargo ship powered up outside the hangar, engines humming like a low heartbeat. "The council has reached a decision," she continued, her voice lowering slightly. Ethan's expression grew serious. "About humanity." "Yes," she said, "the containment proposals have been dissolved. The Alliance recognizes humans as equal strategic partners, not potential threats." He let out a slow breath he did not realize he had been holding. "But," she added carefully, "there is always a but," he muttered. "There are still factions beyond Alliance space who fear what they witnessed," she said. "They believe humanity's resilience could disrupt existing power balances." "So we are still being watched," he said. "Yes," she replied, "but now with caution instead of hostility." He nodded slowly. The galaxy would never stop watching. That was the nature of power and survival. But something was different now. Humanity was not alone in that observation. It stood with allies who had seen what humans chose under pressure. Lyra looked at him with a depth that would have been impossible weeks ago. "When I first approached you," she said, "I believed you were a data point in a larger equation." "And now," he asked. "Now I understand that equations cannot measure choice," she said quietly. He tilted his head slightly. "You chose to stand in grief," she continued. "You chose to protect strangers. You chose to enter the heliox drift knowing survival was uncertain. That choice echoes beyond numbers." He looked away briefly, embarrassed by the weight of her words. "I was just doing what felt right," he said. "That is precisely why it matters," she replied. Silence settled between them again, but this time it was comfortable. She took one more step closer, close enough that he could see faint reflections of the hangar lights in her glowing eyes. "There is one more truth," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "When I found you in tears that night," she continued, "I sensed something I did not understand. It was not only pain, it was defiance beneath the pain, a refusal to disappear." He swallowed quietly. "I returned each day because I wanted to understand that defiance," she said. "Now, I know it is not rare among humans, but it is powerful." He met her gaze fully now, not avoiding, not guarded. "You once said I was a signal," he reminded her. "Yes," she said. "What am I now?" he asked. She considered the question carefully, as if weighing it with more than logic. "You are proof that feeling deeply is not weakness," she said, her voice steady but filled with something new. "It is strength that refuses to break." Outside the hangar, stars glittered beyond the transparent upper panels, quiet and endless. Ethan looked up at them, something he had avoided doing for years. The sky no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a challenge. Lyra followed his gaze upward, standing beside him rather than across from him. "For weeks you avoided the alien woman who watched you," she said softly. He allowed a faint smile. "I remember." "And now," she continued. "Now, I do not look away," he finished. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and distant fleets, in quiet research stations and border patrol ships, the story of humanity continued to ripple outward, not as a threat, not as a warning, but as an example. Humans felt fear, they felt grief, they felt anger and doubt. But when the universe pressed against them, they pressed back harder. And in Hangar 17, beneath steady lights and silent stars, The alien woman who once studied a broken human now stood beside him as an equal. Because the day she found him in tears was the day the galaxy began to understand that a human heart, once tested, does not simply survive. It roars.